So you just like that all.
Like that?
Let's call this meeting. Our scheduled meeting of the South Tahoe Public Utility District to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any comments from the audience? Seeing none, is there any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar? None? I'll second that. Do we have to wait till 2:05 to open the hearing? Okay. But Julie, if you want to come and get ready.
I should have sat at the back of the room.
Yeah.
It's taken me at 2:05 to get up here. Good afternoon.
So we have to wait a bit to open the public hearing and then we'll hear from you.
So, do you want me to kind of give you a little bit of background on the project? Can we do that outside of the hearing?
Very
Well, I should do it all.
Okay. Stall.
That is your job. To be the
Do
you want to pull the comp study forward and just do that now?
I'm sorry,
Do you want to pull the comp study forward and do that since that's not a public hearing? And the next two items?
is that going to be quick?
I don't believe that's going to be quick.
No, I didn't.
But we can always start late. We just can't start before 2:05.
Oh, we can't start before.
We can always
Well,
start
why don't we do
later.
this? Why don't we do payment and claims?
Like 2 minutes.
Which I move approval of payment of claims in the amount of $904,225.63.
We just haven't been in the hand together.
Okay. Yours working there?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it for a minute, trying to string this out for everybody.
I guess we could skip ahead to standing and ad hoc committee report. Anyone? There's another 30 seconds. Actually, I'll go ahead and do DORADO County Water Agency Purveyor report, which there's nothing to report other than, did you get the memo that so we're not going to have a meeting again until May 10th.
I did not get it.
You didn't get that? Yeah, so there's two conflicts. One of them was AQUA and one was maybe cap to cap. So they canceled the meetings and the meeting will actually, and May 10th is actually a Friday.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I'll forward that to you. I was assuming that they.
But Ken's just trying to avoid us.
I think so. I think he's like, yeah. So you left that message about the check.
Yeah, I did, man, yeah.
Okay, so that's all I have on DORADO County Water. And I think that we can open our public hearing to receive comments on the designation of 2019 heavily tanked improvement project. Very good.
Good afternoon. We're coming to you today with a request that the board find that the Heavenly Tank Improvements Project for 2019 is substantially complex to warrant us withholding a 10% retention on this project as opposed to the 5% that is allowed by the Public Contract Code. And then once we've done that, we'll be asking for authorization for staff to go ahead and bid this project so that we can get it constructed before the end of the grading season and before Heavenly Vail Resorts needs to start making snow again next season. So, the project in question includes replacing the interior and portions of the exterior coating of the Heavenly Valley tank. It was constructed in the mid-1980s, and in 2012, we had an inspection done of the coatings, and it was found to need interior recoating at a minimum. This site, however, is also been the recipient of extensive tagging in the past. There's a lot of graffiti on the exterior of the tank. And it is also in a very highly trafficked area, being right at the top of the Bunny Hills, behind the California Base Lodge. And so the intention of the project is not only to replace the coatings, but also to make other improvements to the tank itself, including installing a internal mixing system and cathodic protection, but also to install a modular block retaining wall behind the tank to help slow slope erosion that's occurring and to fence the tank. And we met with Vail Resorts a few weeks ago, went over plans with them, and they are on board with all the improvements that we're planning for that site. So the reason this project is substantially complex is that because of the grading season limitations imposed by the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, we need to have the retaining wall, the fencing installed before October 15th, because that is earthquake related. And then because of the importance of this tank to be able to provide snowmaking water to Heavenly over the winter, it's imperative that we get this coating project completed by November 1st, the coating pieces of it, so we can get that tank back online for their use. We cannot provide snowmaking water over the winter without this tank because they can out-pump our delivery from David Lane. So anyway, those are the main reasons. There's actually 5 specific reasons that we've outlined in the agenda that make this a substantially complex project under the public contracting code. But those are the 2 really most significant ones. So,
Do you have any questions?
Is there anyone that wants to make a comment in the public hearing regarding this project? There are none.
If there's no public comment and you're done with your presentation, and unless you've got any questions after that, then you can close and then go into any discussion you want.
Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing. Thank you for the information. There's no other discussion? So we'll have a vote, a motion.
I'll move that we find the Heavenly Tank Improvement Project for 2019 complex, substantially complex, and authorize staff to advertise for construction bids for the 2019 Heavenly Tank Improvement Project. I'll second.
Thank you very much.
Now, we will open a public hearing to present the Tahoe Valley South Substation Annual Report for the 2018 water.
Good afternoon, board members. For the record, my name is Eagle Bergson. I'm a hydrogeologist for South Tahoe Public Utility District, and I'm here to present the board the 2018 water year annual report for the Tahoe Valley South Subbasin. This report was submitted to the Department of Water Resources this past Monday in accordance with its reporting requirements under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and is also posted on the district's website for public use. So the annual report is organized into 7 sections. We have an executive summary if you don't want to get into detail for the whole report. Section 1, the introduction, describes the general setting and the precipitation that occurred over the past water year. Section 2 describes the current hydrologic conditions within the groundwater basin. Section 3, the basic management objectives, describes the actions that were performed during the 2018 water year to move those objectives forward. Section 4 describes some of the actions that have been identified for the current water year or 2019 water year. And Section 5 is a real short section which talks about any changes made to the groundwater management plan, whether under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act you're not allowed to make any changes to your groundwater management plan, so it's very brief. And so we'll now I'll try to walk you through the report and give you some of the highlights that are in the 2018 annual report. So first off, there are 3 groundwater basins. Let me see if you can see my mouse. But there are 3 groundwater basins that are recognized by the Department of Water Resources within the greater Lake Tahoe hydrologic basin. There's one up by Kings Beach at the north end. That's the Tahoe North subbasin. There's one along the west shore around Homewood, and that is the Tahoe West Basin. And we're down at the southern end in blue as in the Tahoe South Basin 6-5.01. The Tahoe South Basin is the largest and most productive of these 3 groundwater basins, and it's the only one of the basins that have been ranked by the Department of Water Resources as a medium priority basin. The importance of that is that as a medium priority basin under the Sustainable Groundwater Management, because it is a medium priority basin, we are now required to manage the basin under the new groundwater management regulations that are which make up the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So what I also showed on the slide are the priority points that make us a medium priority basin. If you take a look at the breakdown of those points, the most important ones are, well, the ones that were scored the highest was the number of public water supply wells that we have within our basin. We got 5 points for that. We also got 4 points for our very high reliance on groundwater for drinking water. Also the number of production wells, and then you can see in declining order population density, and then there were some basin-specific ranking points that were given to the basin because of our current issues with groundwater contamination. And the last but not least is we got a point because of the rate of our population growth, which was not high. So again, as a medium priority basin, we have additional requirements for the basin, and these include some annual reporting requirements. So this slide shows the components that are required under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act to be addressed within the annual report, and also on the far right-hand side is the specific section in the report where that information can be found. It's also provided as a table in the upfront portion of the annual report. So talking now about the groundwater basin. Groundwater basin is the low valley floor area that, well, this is a terrain map, and so that the area outlined with the dashed blue line shows the boundaries of the groundwater basin. And that pretty much is the lower valley floor portion of our area. And that covers an area of about, as you can see, 14,800 acres. And then surrounding the groundwater basin are 7 watersheds. And those extend from the boundary of the groundwater basin up to the boundary of the watershed. So to the, like the crest of the Sierras and the crest of the, on the west side, the Crystal Range on the west side and the Carson Range on the east side. And that's marked by the, in this graphic, by the county line on the right, lower right portion of the figure. So those watersheds cover a much larger area, and it's a natural system that collects and basically funnels all the precipitation within our area into and through the groundwater basin. So we get a large benefit from that. For sake of description, the groundwater basin is subdivided into sub-areas, into 7 geographically based sub-areas. You can see them listed there. Of those 7, that extension of the groundwater basin, which crosses the state line, is not subject to management under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Okay, talking about now groundwater conditions. Groundwater conditions are, well, each water year, or water years are used to compare as far as temporal changes in groundwater conditions within an area. So a water year is defined, or the 2018 water year, is that period from October 1st, 2017 through September 30th of 2018. And so this report will show the groundwater conditions in terms of the following parameters, which are used in the report to describe those conditions. Precipitation and recharge, groundwater levels. We're going to look at the changes in groundwater storage. We're going to look at how much water has been taken out of the groundwater basin in terms of groundwater production, and we'll talk a little bit about groundwater quality. So, water year type is generally classified based on the amount of total precipitation which occurs over a particular area. And so for our area, we've taken historical records of total precipitation measured at the Haggins Meadow Snowtail Station, which occurs in the watershed area surrounding the groundwater basin. And that's used as a reference station for our area. So we've taken the historical record from the Haggins Meadow Station, and we've broken that down into different classes, from critically dry to very wet, based on precipitation range, or defining each class by a given precipitation range. For example, the normal range of precipitation for this station, and as used for our basin, ranges from a low of 26 inches per year to up to 37 inches per year. And in the graph, you see water year type based on, for each water year, based on the precipitation measured at that Haggins Meadow Station. And for the 2018 water year, you can see that we had about 29.5 inches of precipitation, which put us just in the normal range. So you can think back to 2017, you can see on the graph you had a record year, okay? You had over 65 inches of precipitation at that station. And we had to basically recalibrate or reclassify because of that outlier precipitation at that station in 2017. And so, again, by definition, since it's a record, Any year after that, that's not a record, is going to be less, right? So keep that in mind. It's going to be in comparison to the last. And so anyhow, you can see in 2018, we were actually, I mean, it was normal, but you'll see that the reduction in recharge and storage, again, it's being compared to a record year, is, you know, on the storage side, it shows it as negative. So here's a plot of groundwater storage or groundwater recharge, and this is calculated from the groundwater model. I show a line of what the average recharge over the model period is from 1983 to present. It's about 41,200 acre feet. We had a little bit below average recharge. I think the recharge was 37,746 acre feet during the 2018 water year. And that was about 92% of average. So here are hydrographs. So this is from the groundwater model. Groundwater model shows that we had a little bit below average recharge. And then in the field, if you take a look at, so these are field measurements from observation wells, from 4 observation wells in the within the groundwater basin. And again, the bar graphs show water year total precipitation over that period. You can see that water levels are basically stable. They're not changing. You see little fluctuations. Those are seasonal fluctuations, but overall their trends are maintaining their stability. They're neither rising or they're falling. If you take a look at overall groundwater levels within the basin, they actually decline slightly. Again, that's being compared. That's being compared to a base period, but they declined slightly compared to the previous year by about 1.89 feet on average. But overall levels remained within the normal range, and that's what's compared to a base period. And the baseline period is taking a look at all the groundwater levels that were recorded in the same wells from between 2001 to 2010, okay? And then what you'll see in the report, a comparison of the water levels that were measured in 2018 against that base period. And those water levels remained in the normal to the above normal range, because we were already in above normal after that 2017 year. They declined slightly, so we're still overall generally above normal compared to that base period. So I hope I didn't completely confuse you on that one, but if after reading the report you still have questions about it, please give me a call. Groundwater elevations. So these are, again, these are simulated and produced from the groundwater model. So they reflect, again, changes in recharge into the model and also changes in groundwater reduction, how much we're pulling out. I show both here to reflect low groundwater conditions. So these are taken from the fall of 2017, and then high groundwater conditions during the spring of 2018. You don't see much of a change in groundwater elevations between the October and the May readings, which is good. So you're not seeing significant fluctuations over an annual cycle, and that's you know, the pattern of groundwater flow that's shown here is that you have groundwater flow coming from the margins of the basin at the very southern part of the basin, and everything is flowing north to the ultimate point of discharge, which is Lake Tahoe. So if anybody mentions to you that they believe that the source of groundwater from for our groundwater system is Lake Tahoe. That's not correct. The source of the water to our groundwater basin is coming from the surrounding watersheds and moving out towards Lake Tahoe. Okay, groundwater quality. So this picture hasn't changed since last year. Southwide plume continues to be the major groundwater concern within the groundwater basin. This is covers a 400-acre area that's kind of in the north central portion of the basin within the South Lake Tahoe sub-area. The plume continues to impair water in 3 public water supply wells. The Lucan number 5, Tahoe Keys number 2, and also the Lucan Brothers number 2 well. There are low levels of PCE contamination in the Tahoe Keys number 1. So what that has done is it's taken a little over 3 million gallons a day of available water production off the table, since those wells are currently shut in. However, if you take a look at the source capacity of all the wells within the basin, there were 15 active wells within the basin, the source capacity of those wells combined, we have enough water to meet the water demand for the community by about almost 6 million gallons a day. So here is the groundwater production for 2018. You can see the total production for the 15 active wells was a little touch higher than it was in 2017. Again, 2017 was a very wet year. 2018 was a bit drier. The total production was 6,910 acre feet, which was about it's a little shy of what the median value is at 7748 acre feet. It should be noted that 77% of that water production that was actually pulled out of the basin was in that same sub-area, in the South Lake Tahoe sub-area, as where we have groundwater contamination. So that tells you a little bit about the importance of addressing that southward plume. Okay, here's a complicated graph showing water year type. So that's kind of a surrogate for recharge and precipitation in the basin in the bar graph, the blue bar graph. We have a line that shows groundwater production. You can see over the term, groundwater production is about the same. We generally stay about the same. It's slightly declined since 2007, but it's generally pretty flat. And then we have annual change in groundwater storage and cumulative change in groundwater storage. So what is groundwater storage? So groundwater storage is the year-to-year change of the amount of groundwater that's in the aquifer system within the groundwater basin. Okay, so it's kind of like the amount of the current amount or the change in your bank account balance from year to year. And if you take a look at this graph, what it shows are a couple things. First, that annual changes in groundwater storage within our basin are much more sensitive to changes in climate, the amount of precipitation, the water year type, all basically saying the same thing, than it is to groundwater production. That's somewhat unusual for much of the state of California. What drives changes in groundwater storage is groundwater production. And the reason that we're so fortunate is that, again, if you take a look at the groundwater production was a little under 7,000 acre feet per year. On average, we get 41,000 acre feet recharged into the basin. So we're using, as far as our groundwater production, a little bit less than 20% of the total groundwater recharge that's coming into the basin on an annual basis. So if you take a look again, comparing year-to-year changes in groundwater storage, compared again to that big banner year that we had in 2017, 2018, we dropped into a negative amount. We had a negative change in groundwater storage of about 8,600 acre feet during 2018. But if you take a look at the cumulative change since 2005, we're still in the black by about close to 50,000 acre feet. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the second half of the report focuses on a summary of the kind of actions that we're taking towards implementation of the groundwater management plan and our progress towards achieving our basin management objectives. Now, basin management objectives in the groundwater management plan, these are flexible guidelines or goals, such as maintaining a sustainable groundwater supplies, protecting water quality, and a number of other ones, but those are the two most significant ones, major ones. So some of our big achievements during 2018, in March 2018, the district executed a planning grant agreement with the State Water Resources Control Board to conduct the Southwide feasibility study, again, to take care of that contamination issue that we have in the Southwide Tahoe sub-area. That was granted at a funding level of over $500,000. And then following the grant award, we completed the Southwide feasibility study groundwater investigation. We completed a screening level human health risk assessment that looked at the risk of PCE contamination to water supply in public water wells in the Southwide area. We also updated the fit and transport model, which was used for performing simulations to evaluate remedial alternatives being considered to address the contamination. We spent considerable effort on public outreach during 2018 in development of outreach materials and public announcements. And a big thank you to Shelley for all of her work during the past year on that, maintaining the groundwater page, and through performance of 3 workshops to keep the public informed and up to date on the progress of the feasibility study, as well as workshops with the Stakeholders Advisory Group to discuss groundwater items related again to the feasibility study, to the 2018 Department of Water Resources Basin Prioritization, and the results of the survey of well owners report, that which was finalized in 2018. We also, from the work that was done through the groundwater management plan, we also completed and prepared technical reports, and there were 3 technical reports that we completed during 2018, which are listed here, and those are also available on the groundwater page of the district's website. So what do we plan on doing next year, or this current year? Well, we have a number of ongoing activities that we will continue with. We'll continue to monitor implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in California, so we're going to stay on top of those regulations, and whatever guidance is issued by DWR for implementing Sigma in the basin. We're also going to continue to monitor basin conditions and available groundwater supplies. We are going to continue to work in collaboration with the County Water Agency, since they are also a GSA within our basin, and work with the Stakeholders Advisory Group, and we will continue to work to keep the public informed on our activities. What we have in progress that we look to complete During 2016, as you may recall, the district submitted its existing groundwater management plan, and we also completed an analysis of basin conditions, which we submitted as groundwater sustainability plan alternatives. These were again submitted to DWR in 2016. That assessment is overdue, but it's been promised by DWR that it will be completed by mid-year this year, so we're kind of expecting it to happen in the next couple of months. If accepted, then hopefully we will be, if one of those two alternatives were accepted, then we'll be either adopting a groundwater sustainability plan alternative, hopefully it'll be the existing groundwater management plan, or if it's not accepted, then we will submit a groundwater sustainability plan initial notification, which basically starts the ball rolling for development of a formal groundwater sustainability plan. So that will be one of the things to look forward to in the next couple of months. We hope to complete the groundwater basin survey of well owners. There are 630 some odd private and small community water system well owners within our basin. During the first phase of the well survey, we were able to get responses to our survey from 370 of those. So there's a little over 260 remaining, and we'd like to complete that survey this year with outreach to those 260 well owners. And then the Southwide feasibility study, the agreement, the completion date on the agreement is June 30th, and we are working very hard to try to honor that completion date. Okay, so what did we spend during the past 1 year? Well, here's a breakdown of those expenses. What I am presenting here is the expenses over the fiscal year that better aligns than the calendar year with the water year. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. We actually spent less this year than we did in 2016, 2017. The majority of the expenditures for consulting, labor, and legal costs were through that Southwide feasibility study. And also all the permitting costs, less than $1,000 in permitting costs, were also for the groundwater investigation that was done for the feasibility study. And the other expenses, the majority of that is for the temporary workers that were used for the well owner survey. So, I don't know if this makes you feel any better, but here's a slide showing cost of non-compliance. So this is based on the state intervention fees that have been drafted by the State Water Board in case you fall out of compliance of what they could potentially bill us. And so for our basin, it comes up using their guidance. It's about $300,000. I'm not suggesting that non-compliance is better than compliance, but it's just as a point of comparison. Lastly, I'd like to thank all the members of the 2018 Stakeholders Advisory Group. Here's a listing of those participants. Really, the success of the plan would be difficult without all these different agencies being involved and getting their input, and also helping us to do the actions that we were able to complete during 2018. So again, thank you very much to those members, and I'm ready to take any questions you might have about the report.
Gary, do we need to close? Or Gary?
You can leave it open for a little bit if there's questions or anything. Then if there isn't, then you can close it for discussion. Is this available on the webpage?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. If you'd like, I can also send you the PDF and maybe use your download if you'd like. Or I can get a copy for you. I'll get your copy. Okay. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you. Report, the hearing is closed. Maybe Evo, you're up again.
I am. So this next one, I believe we may have talked about this briefly before, introduced this to you. So we have the reimbursement agreement with Seven Springs Limited Partnership and Fox Capital Management. These are what are regarded as, what they call themselves, the working parties. So these are actually the responsible parties that are responding to the claim and abatement order for the former Lake Tahoe Waterworks site near the Y. And as part of one of their actions that they proposed, and the State Water or the Lahontan Water Board is supporting them in, is to conduct a utility line investigation. And as part of that utility line investigation, they want to do a closed circuit TV survey of a portion of the district sewer line. The district's position is that we do not allow anybody to go willy-nilly and do, put whatever tools or equipment that they want into our sewer system, and that, but to help them with their investigation, we've entered into a reimbursement agreement with those parties to perform the CCT survey ourselves with district crews and equipment. So it's a little less than 800 feet of line that runs, again, over from Glorine, and it crosses Lake Tahoe Boulevard at Glorine, and then I guess it makes a right on Tucker down to the main line that's at Highway 89. So that's they want to take a look, see if there's any breaks in that line, or areas where PCE may have collected and then over time infiltrated and could potentially be a pathway for contamination of groundwater. So under the terms of the reimbursement agreement, the working parties agree to pay the district an amount not to exceed $2,800. We came up with that amount asking crews as to what the survey would take in terms of cost for equipment and personnel to do that work. And plus we have $1,000 towards legal expenses for preparation of the agreement. So that's what they agreed to get us back in exchange for providing the results of that survey to them. Any questions?
Sure, I'll move that we enter into a reimbursement agreement with Seven Springs Limited Partnership and Fox Capital Management Corporation to perform a sewer line investigation as described in Exhibit A of the agreement at a cost reimbursement not to exceed $2,800 plus $1,000 toward preparation of the agreement.
Second.
So Melanie, can Kelly sign the agreement or do you have to look at it?
She can sign it.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eagle.
And now it looks like we are going to receive a presentation of the results of the conference.
I like to introduce Doug Johnson from Ralph Anderson and Associates, here to present the results of the compensation study that we began in November of 2017. The next step will be to enter into negotiations with the union and the management staff regarding implementation of the comp study. That was agreed to in our negotiations in 2017. That we would negotiate the implementation after we got the results. And then we'll be having our closed session today to discuss strategies for negotiating that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug to present his survey findings.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm going to kind of cover why these surveys are done, why organizations do them, the process that we used in this project, and just the general findings that resulted. So surveys are a way of informing organizations using data. So rather than use a dartboard or dice or some random, in my opinion, data informs the organization. It informs the board, it informs management, it informs labor representatives. So that's the whole reason that we do market surveys, because without data in the marketplace, it's a guessing game. You can maybe track a little bit in terms of what's happening in the marketplace based on when you do recruitments, whether or not you have a high number of applicants or not, why you don't have applicants, but getting hard data as extensive as we did in this survey for a number of jobs gives you a much better sense of what's happening in the marketplace, and so that you can make informed decisions. In California, it's also important that to the degree you ever get to impasse with a labor group, fact-finding processes require data. So that's the reason that these surveys are done. Some organizations I've met with, sometimes there'll be a concern that, well, we do a survey, and then this agency does a survey, and that agency does a survey, and it creates this kind of rolling process in the marketplace, and sometimes it's referred to as the dog's tail chasing the dog. And my candid response to that is, yes, that's the way markets work. So when the employers around you have to increase their wages to be competitive, to hire staff, then that will be an impact on the market. All you're doing is measuring that. Survey work doesn't drive that. I appreciate that to some degree that there is a bit of a catch-22 on that, but it's a normal part of looking at pay plans to do surveys. Private sector does the same thing. They just buy data instead of doing the detailed survey like what we did. So for this project, in order to be able to measure the marketplace, we have to select specific survey organizations. And we have a number of factors that we look at. We do consider historical practices to the degree an organization has a really strong set of agencies or past practice. Primarily what we start with in this organization is your nature of services. This is a unique district. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. Being in the business of providing water treatment, water distribution, wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, it's not that many organizations that have all those services under one house. So nature of services becomes kind of a driving force in looking at the marketplace. It plays into geographic proximity. If you could find a dozen or so or more, if you like a lot more data, but if you could find a number of agencies within the Tahoe Basin that had all those services under one house, you probably wouldn't need to leave the Tahoe Basin, but you can. So that opens up the market to looking at a broader statewide marketplace. So the reason that we looked at statewide was so that we could touch on, can we get other kind of resorts or other similar types of tourism-based communities? Can we find agencies that have, check off all those 4 service areas that you have? Can we find organizations of a similar size? And so we do, because we're looking statewide, want to focus on organizations that are more like you in terms of size, and we certainly want to be very kind of cognitive of economic similarity. Let's not use agencies that are all in lower cost of living areas or all in higher cost of living areas. Balance is really the key of trying to balance out these different factors. So this is the criteria we looked at. As I said, nature of services was kind of the foremost thing, trying to cover those 4 areas. And we did utilize a statewide market, and again, kind of balancing size and economic considerations in order to be able to find our market agencies. So this is the result. I have 2 different charts on this. This kind of gives you just the list without giving you a bunch of numbers. So we have our 5 local agencies. We have districts that are added in. I'm going down the left column here that have all service areas. We have districts with 3 of your 4 service areas. And then on the right-hand side, we start getting more narrow where we have some additional wastewater treatment agency, water production distribution, other districts. I think Helix has some number of factors why we wanted to include them. And then we did have some cities that we included. So there are cities that provide the services that you provide, and so we wanted to include those as well. So this gives us a fairly healthy list of agencies. As we go through and do the survey, some of these agencies won't have job matches, and so by having a large list of agencies, we're maximizing the ability to get ourselves ideally around at least 9 or 10 matches for the jobs that we're trying to survey in the course of collecting the data. And this is a chart in case you like detail. When we went through the selection process, we worked with a committee, and we broke down treatment capacity in terms of the MGD for the treatment facilities, production wells, distribution lines in terms of customers, collection lines, all that information. Plus we had some economic information. We used information published by a group called the Economic Research Institute. It's not us, it's a third party. They've been providing economic information in terms of relative cost of living from city to city and relative wages from city to city. They've been providing that for 35 or 40 years. So we use that as a basis of being able to look at economic similarity. So we did use a lot of information. I think the initial list that we started up with was 60 or more, maybe as many as 80, I think, that we've originally looked at. And then we worked down towards whittling it to getting a group of agencies that kind of touched, again, size, balance of economic similarity, and then being able to cover all the major service areas in the organization. The process that we used for doing the survey, we collect all the data. It was tailored to this specific project. We're not reusing data. We actually started that data collection, I think, in spring last year, and then went through an update process and finalized it in November. One of the things that's unique on this project, maybe to some of my clients, but I fully embraced it and loved it, is that we had extensive interaction in terms of reviewing and commenting and researching kind of questions and issues from the project committee. So that ensured that the organization had buy-in to the data that we collected. One of the things that happens when you do a survey like this is we can get 10 people in the room, and we can have them try and match a job here to these agencies we're surveying, and you get 10 different results. Probably 60 or 70% of the results are the same. There's always going to be some agencies where their qualifications aren't quite the same as you, or they have service areas where the nature of the job is that they wear more hats, and you are more specialized here and vice versa. So there are some job matching situations that require getting some feedback, and we got an extensive amount of feedback. We had a nice working relationship with the committee where they raised issues, we researched them. We went through, I think, 2 or 3 levels of that before we got our final set of data in November. So that was the process that we used. A couple things in terms of policy. Market position ultimately is a policy decision that the organization makes. Some organizations I work with, I meet with a general manager, they tell me that we want to be at the median or the 75th percentile of the market, and I run the numbers that way, and then they carry it through their budget process or whatever internal process. Some projects I work on, there's a board level of interaction or a city council level of interaction to weigh in and provide insight into this. And then, of course, ultimately, these kinds of decisions, if it's a represented employee, have a meet and confer aspect to them as well. So when you start talking strategy in terms of market position, some of that is negotiation strategy, so probably best left for a closed session. But the concept is that you as an organization have to decide, given this market we survey, do you want to be at the middle of the market, slightly above the middle of the market, slightly below, anywhere in between? What I've described here is that the common market position for public agencies is somewhere between the 50th and 75th percentile. That's kind of the window, and probably the majority of agencies are going to be the median, the 50th percentile of the marketplace. Obviously, a key component of that is what do you need to pay in order to recruit and retain, but also what can you afford? So we're not here to talk about affordability or budget impacts, but obviously you have to understand if you commit to a market position, you have to have the budget resources to sustain that. So I want to give you kind of a high-level review of what the survey results are. The way I like to do that is show you kind of different increments in terms of relationships to market. So as I kind of bring in the bars here, out of all the jobs we surveyed, 5 of the job titles we found to be 10 to 15% below the market median. So we looked at the market median as our starting point. And then we had another 7 jobs that were from 5 to 10% below market median. We had 20 jobs that were within 5%, so 0 to 5% below median. And then we had 12 jobs that were 0 to 5% above median. And then I think it looks like a couple jobs that are 5 to 10% above median, and then one job that is 10 to 15%. I think that's it. The nice thing about this is a bell curve. So I always expect a bell curve. I've never done any work in Russia or a country where it doesn't have market pricing for jobs. So we do expect somewhat of a bell curve. The only time I would come across a survey where we don't find this is if it's a very isolated market. So I did a project once in Grand Forks, North Dakota, which is the coolest place I've ever worked. And their market looks very different because they don't have a number of agencies that can draw people out of them, and it's not even many public agencies across the state. But in this case, we get a nice, strong kind of peak in the data. Most of your jobs, by far, almost all of your jobs are between 5% below median, that's the shaded area, and 5% above median. The majority of them are below, so if we just do that calculation, almost 70% of them are below market, but again, most of them are within that plus minus 5%. And if we wanted to come up with a ballpark average, I don't recommend doing this because you have to look at each job individually, but 3.1% below median on average gives you some sense in terms of what the trend is for these jobs. We also look at benefits, so I just wanted to highlight the things that we found in looking at your benefits. Cash benefits, I would say overall you're very strong related to the marketplace. You don't have benefits, at least when you look at all of your benefits, it's not significantly altering your market position. There are areas where you're strong and areas where you're light, but the total package is going to be generally consistent with market. And I did want to highlight a few areas where you're a little bit different. So I just wanted to acknowledge that a third of the agencies have longevity pay. That's not a popular benefit, so the survey data bears that out. Organizations that have longevity have experienced issues with retention. And so that's the reason you might have longevity, as if you hire people and then 10 years or 5 years down the road, they all leave. You have high turnover rates, so you can sometimes put in longevity increments to mitigate that. When we had done surveys 5 years ago, employer paid member contributions, which is where the employer pays a portion or all of the employees' retirement contribution. That was a lot more popular 5 years ago with state law, PEPRA, the pension reform law that was passed and went into effect in January 2013. Agencies have moved away from that. So you still do a little bit of that. I think that there's still some agencies that do that. And so there are employers that do that, but not many of them anymore. If we look at deferred compensation, particularly with management, we do have, I think, in the 50-some or 60% range, that many agencies that do deferred compensation where the employer makes a deferred compensation contribution for the employee. So that's just something notable. On your insurance, you're really strong on insurance. Most employers out there don't pay 100%. They're doing like a 90-10 split where the employee's paying 10% of the premium for an employee plus 2 or family level benefit. Your retirement benefit, we look at it 2 ways. One is to look at your formula and your 2.7 at 55 for a classic member. That's if you were to hire somebody from another agency that's already in a pension program. 2.7 at 55 is pretty consistent with the market. I think anywhere from 2.7 at 55 are pretty common. 3% to 60 is kind of the next best. And then along with that, we looked at the retiree health. This is where the market, one more point on the 2.7 at 55. Your employer contribution rate is lower than other agencies. That could be for a number of reasons. Workforce demographics, basically normal costing of those retirement plans tend to be very similar, but it's the unfunded actuarial liability that agencies have that causes those rates to be higher. So some of the agencies that are in the survey, for whatever reason, have a higher actuarial liability. So that's why their total contribution rate will be higher than yours. So I'm always cautious in reporting that because, yes, you're contributing less towards retirement, but the employee doesn't know any different. They're not getting lesser of a benefit. It just means that for whatever reason, historically, either sometimes organizations do pension obligation bonds or they do cash buy downs, or it just again could be a workforce demographic issue in terms of why your rate is lower. As employees continue to be hired, we're finding with some of our clients that half their employees are not in these classic tiers. So they're getting the new PEPRA tier. And if we start getting into those kinds of comparisons, it's a pointless comparison because you're talking about a non-sworn job, all CalPERS agencies are the same. Same formula, same cost with maybe a couple of tweaks in terms of doing COLAs or things, but there's generally no difference in terms of those costs. The other retirement category we look at is retiree health. So 3 agencies contribute, as you do, into some sort of health savings plan. What that means is you're spending current dollars into a plan that the employee can then utilize when they retire for the retiree benefit. So it does cost you money today, but you don't end up having that large liability that's out there in the future. Most agencies, right or wrong, still do kind of pay-as-you-go when the employee retires. So it's not costing them anything today. I mean, it is for the retirees, but for the workforce today, once that employee retires, then they'll have some level of benefit. And some agencies will pay an employee plus 1 level benefit. It's not just one, it's not the 10% minimum or something lower. So we do have a number of agencies that do that. Of course, they'll end up having in their financial, in their CAFRA, in their financial report, they'll end up having to report that OPEB liability. That's a cost that they have to deal with and pay down somewhere in either now or amortized over time or sometime in the future. So we're seeing agencies slowly transition to the pay-as-you-go model that majority do today, to more of a paying current dollars. It's just a slow process. Much of that needs to be bargained, and it's just one of those things that unions in California have been very slow and reluctant to give up. So I would say that wrapping that discussion up, you're high in your kind of insurance benefit in terms of your for the current insurance benefits you pay. You're arguably a little bit lower on retiree health because, again, most of these agencies you're competing with, the employee is going to get a committed, arguably larger benefit upon the retirement, not just the monies in the fund. And then the last thing is we did look at leave benefits. I think the only thing notable we found there is that most of the agencies, 75%, a little bit more than that, have admin leave or management leave for their exempt employees or management employees. That's typically 5 days a year. So that's typically in place to offset overtime, although if you have some sort of comp time rules that are generous, that can offset that. So, and I know you do have that here, but that's just again, kind of noting that difference in the data. My last page here is just to kind of talk conceptually about implementation. What do you do with these results? So some organizations will take these results and they'll use it as a way of kind of fine-tuning an overall increase. And so for the jobs, rather than targeting individual jobs, they might create an overall increase. Or they might do something like, well, we're going to do an overall increase, and then these jobs that are still with that increase, more than a certain percentage behind market, we might do a little bit more for them. So more of an equity or kind of a targeted adjustment. Other organizations will do benchmarking, where they're going to take this data and they're going to slot specific jobs, and you have internal relationships that kind of build in and around that. So that's the way that the data is typically used. And in this organization, that would be kind of the internal process. Should I need to be involved? I certainly can be, but that's more of an internal process and likely would involve some bargaining. In terms of administration of the pay plan, the data we collected was a November picture when we finalized the data. So there have been 6 agencies since November that gave an across-the-board type of increase. There's going to be another large set of agencies come July 1 of 2019 that will start getting increases because a lot of fiscal years track to July 1, and then there'll be a handful that have fiscal years in the fall. So anytime you make an adjustment based on a study, you have to recognize that it's catching you up to a point in time, and you have to be mindful of those future windows. Now, if you're in a bargaining agreement, which I think you are now, you're already locked into some increases for the future. So this data helps inform a number of things kind of combined with that. But just recognize that the data that we've presented starts getting old. It's a little bit old now, but it gets really old starting July 1. And then with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Oh, I did want to make one comment. Sorry, I almost forgot. This chart that I gave you, this 3.1% below, in the written report that we did, which I think was published a couple weeks ago, since that time we found one instance where we had a job that we had some feedback and comment in terms of comparabilities, and they were never resolved. And so we resolved that earlier, or I guess late last week, and ended up removing that job because we didn't end up having enough matches. We thought we had enough, but as we looked more critically at the data, so the only difference between my report today in terms of these numbers is there's one less data point, the water service representative job we've removed from our total sample of jobs, and that's why this is a little bit different than what's in the report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
move to board member reports. Oh, do we start just?
Make a motion to accept the report.
I'll second that. And that has to be okay, now,
Nothing new to report this week.
I have nothing. Then you go to general manager.
Just have a few quick updates for you, starting with staffing. Underground repair water, we completed 7 interviews on March 13th and made a selection. And so we're happy to welcome Hector Vasquez to underground repair, formerly with Thomas Haynes Company. So he started on Tuesday actually, so we finally have underground repair waters back to full strength. Recycled water lead position, please report that Jason Glaze was selected and is moving into the lead position at DVR. So with this promotion, this will open up his old position. But Jason's been in Alpine County for 2.5 years. He's been with the district for 4.5 years. And actually, I knew him previously from Lunchlock. He managed that local operation. So a great hire for us. Customer service representative, we interviewed 7 this past Tuesday and selected Erica Franco. You might know Erica has been at the front desk for about a little over 2 years. She was filling that limited term position that was created. So congratulations to Erica. And that limited term position is being backfilled by Sarah Lucera, who's been working through the temporary agency for the past 4 months. So customer service is finally back to full strength. So all that, we're good. Real quick on PCE, and Eagle provided some information on his presentation. So Eagle's been busy, and he's been leading our efforts on the remediation alternatives development. So working with our staff, with Lukens, with Tahoe Keys, and with Kennedy Jenks to put those alternatives together. And we're really starting to kind of fine tune those alternatives. There's a do nothing alternative, some treatment alternatives. And I think probably the next operations committee will be ready to kind of bring some of those ideas forward, and thereafter we can bring that to the full board. So looking forward to that. And I think in the next, hopefully we'll make it this month, but in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we're planning to have a technical meeting with Lahan and PES. PES is the consultant for Lake Tahoe Laundry Works. So finally getting all the technical folks together and working together to help clean up the line. And then just real quick on public outreach. Shelley especially has been very busy getting information out in support of the Prop 218 primarily. We're looking at putting out a press release that hits the Tribune next Friday on April 12th. And we've also had some ads going into the Tribune and possibly in the Tahoe Mountain News. And she's been on the TV a lot, twice a week. And I think maybe perhaps on radio next week, we'll see. And Paul has an update on the 218, so a little more detail from Paul when he does his report. And then he has some more roadshow presentations coming up in the next 2 weeks to the Tahoe Chamber of Commerce and then the Tahoe Douglas Rotary. After that, Tahoe Resource Conservation District, the South Lake Tahoe Lodging Association, Lead to Save Lake Tahoe, and the Tahoe Engineers, Architects, and Surveyors Group into the summer. So getting our message out there.
Okay, staff and attorney reports. So Tim has an affordable housing update.
I'll be quick. Met with the Housing Tahoe Partnership yesterday. This was the first meeting they've had since January, so not a lot went on. Tahoe basically picked up where we left off in January. They continued to commend us on our efforts on moving forward last year with decreasing the price of the certain capacity units, and that really gave everybody a notion to go forward and do something on their end as well. City and county are really looking at significantly lowering their fees for affordable housing projects. The CTC is looking at selling below their pretty good sized lots for under market value. So it was a lot of talk yesterday. Basically, the only thing that I really did get out of it is, I think it was last year, Bill 1069 passed in California. That had to do with the accessory dwelling units. And basically what that is if somebody's building like a mother-in-law unit or something like that for affordable housing, then we can't charge sewer or water capacity fees. So it looks like TRPA is going to adopt that bill under them. So how fast that'll move forward, I don't know yet. As soon as I get more information on that, I'll let you know.
We've already made that change in our admin code.
We have not made that change
Not
yet. The reason that we haven't made a change yet is we were looking for a permitting agency to tell us what was going to be affordable accessory dwelling units. And it looks like the city and county isn't going to be willing to take that on if they adopt this bill. So they can let us know what it's going to be designated as, whether they're going to charge for it or not. Questions? Thank you.
Yes, so the proclamation notices due go out last Friday, which was within the minimum 45-day time period prior to the board being allowed to vote on the rates. People have been starting to receive them. In addition to that, Shelley sent out a mass email yesterday to about 8,000 of our customers, and she has received and responded to several comments that have been made so far at this point. Let's see. Oh, she also created a Proposition 218 frequently asked question page for our website, so customers can refer to that, and also the customer service staff can refer to it when calls come in. And then our IT department created a form in our Laserfish system, which we can use to capture all the customer calls and comment activity, and we can report that out to you periodically. That's it.
We see the past and future meetings, and I guess we will go into closed session. You want to take a break? Take a 5-minute break.
People here.
Is it for his own application, or is it something you think the board needs to know?
I just wanted to know what the driving was on that May 1st.
The report and the meeting is here.